Hey, you made it. Wherever you are right now, welcome. Maybe you're lying in bed. Maybe you're walking alone with headphones, letting the world around you dissolve. Either way, this isn't going to be a normal story. So go ahead, dim the lights, turn on a fan, let it stir the shadows a little. Make yourself comfortable, but not too comfortable. This isn't a story for sleep. It's a story for waking up, just in a different way. And before we begin, tell me something. Where are you watching from? What time is it there? What does the air feel like? Is the world quiet? Good. Let it stay that way. Silence has a strange way of revealing what noise tries to hide. Because tonight, we're not talking about kings or wars or lost civilizations. We're going deeper, into something older than history, into the lie that built the world. All right, let's begin. Reality is not what you think it is. It never was. You've been told 1,000 quiet lies since the moment you opened your eyes. You were taught to name things, to trust your senses, to believe in what you can touch. You were taught to think of the world as something outside of you, solid, unchanging, absolute. But none of that is true. You don't live in reality. You generate it. Every wall you see, every road you walk, every clock that ticks. It only becomes what it is when you observe it. Not before, not after. In that razor-thin instant of attention, the universe decides to exist. It's not philosophy, it's physics. The most unsettling experiment in modern science, the double-slit, revealed something horrifyingly simple. Reality waits. It waits to be seen. Until then, it's a wave, a probability, an undefined maybe. But the moment it's observed, it chooses. It becomes. So what does that mean for you? It means the world outside your skin, the chair beneath you, the ceiling above, the stars you wish on. They're not independent things. They're stories. Stories told by your perception, sculpted by belief. It means that matter doesn't matter until you say it does. It means your life, all the struggle, the failure, the fear. None of it was ever fixed. It was interpreted. It was agreed upon. It was believed into being. And belief is everything. Because if reality is a hologram, then your beliefs are the lens that brings it into focus. So let's go back, not to childhood, not even to birth, but to the quiet place before you were taught, before school, before language, before you were told who you were. Back then, there were no rules, no ceiling, no walls, no future. Only now, only sensation, only potential. And then they named it. They named the sky, they named the ground, they named you. And with every name, the world became smaller, sharper, more rigid. You were told time moves forward, that cause precedes effect, that what's done is done. But that too is a lie. Time doesn't move, you do. And you don't move through time, you generate it. Every second is a ripple of attention. Every memory is a construct. The past is not fixed. It is remembered into being. And the future? It isn't waiting for you. It's listening. So when you wake up in the morning and feel like something is missing, like your life isn't what it was meant to be, maybe you're right. Maybe what's missing isn't out there. Maybe it's something you buried long ago, a piece of yourself you stopped believing in, the part of you that could bend reality, the part of you that knew the world was listening. But don't be angry. Don't blame anyone. The deception wasn't done out of cruelty. It was passed down from parent to child, from teacher to student, from priest to believer. A chain of sleepwalkers, each one thinking they were awake. And still, here you are, listening, feeling something stir in your chest. A question, a memory, a key. So ask yourself, what if space, time, even your body, are not what they appear to be? What if the things you're afraid of, the debts, the illness, the heartbreak, are not curses but echoes, echoes of belief? Because if everything is built by observation, then what happens when you change the way you look? Not at others, at yourself, the real self, the one underneath the scars and the masks, the self that never forgot how to imagine. What if that version of you is still alive, waiting in the dark, waiting for you to look? Because just like those particles, just like those waves of probability, it's there right now, infinite, undefined, waiting for your eyes. And when you look, when you really see, it collapses into reality. So tell me, Are you ready to see? Because this story doesn't end with an answer. It starts with a choice. And if you're still here, listening in the dark, eyes wide open in a world that suddenly feels different, then maybe you're already making it. We'll go deeper, but not all at once. Reality reshapes slowly, one breath at a time. Not the kind of silence you get in an empty room, but the kind that comes after something cracks. When the illusion breaks, even just a little, and the quiet settles in like dust, soft and everywhere. Maybe you've felt it. That moment when everything you were certain of feels suddenly borrowed. It's not fear, not yet. It's recognition, like walking into your childhood home and realizing none of the furniture is where you remembered it. Like hearing your own name spoken in a language you never learned. You remember, don't you? Something deeper than memory, something older than thought. Because at the center of this deception, this idea that the world is fixed and you are not, is a lie so convincing you didn't even see it being told. They told you that you are in the world, that the world came first, that you were born into it, that you are a piece of something much larger, a speck of matter, a flicker of consciousness, struggling to survive in a vast, empty cosmos. But that story collapses under its own weight. Because what is the world if no one sees it? If a forest falls and there's no ear to hear, does it make a sound? That's the old riddle. But in quantum mechanics, it's not a metaphor. It's a law. There is no forest. Not until it is seen. Not until it is observed. This isn't fantasy. It's proven. Matter behaves like a ghost, a wave of infinite potential, until the moment it is measured. And that act of measuring, of looking, of noticing, creates form, creates distance, creates time, creates everything. So tell me, if the world only exists because you observe it, then what came first? You were taught to see yourself as a body, a fragile sack of flesh floating through space. But what if your body is just the interface, a translator, a vessel? What if who you are is the awareness itself? Not the hands, but the witness to the hands. Not the voice, but the listener behind the voice. You don't have a mind, you are the mind. And the mind does not sit in your skull. It sits nowhere and everywhere. Just like reality, because the mind is not contained by space. Space is contained within the mind. The brain doesn't generate thought, it filters it. The way a radio doesn't create music, it simply tunes into it. Frequencies, vibrations, interpretation, and what you tune into becomes your world. So if your beliefs act like frequencies, what station have you been living on? Fear? Scarcity? Unworthiness? You see, beliefs aren't ideas, they're permissions. And most of us were raised to seek permission from the outside. We begged for it, approval, acceptance, proof, a sign that we were allowed to feel safe. But no sign ever came, not for long. Because reality doesn't give you what you want, it gives you what you believe. It mirrors. That's why some people always find betrayal, or failure, or suffering. Not because they deserve it, not because the world is cruel, but because the world is echoing their expectation. And when you believe in your own smallness, the universe folds around that belief, like water bending to the shape of its cup. But when you change the shape of your mind, everything ripples. So why don't more people do it? Why doesn't everyone just wake up and reshape the world? Because belief has inertia. You didn't build yours overnight. They were poured into you like concrete, bit by bit, word by word. Don't speak. Don't ask questions. This is just the way it is. Every sentence etched deeper into the walls of your inner reality. And now, here you are, staring at the cracks, feeling the truth press in from the outside. You can feel it, can't you? The war between what you were taught and what you know. Not in your mind, in your bones. The pull of something larger. A pattern you can't quite see but feel shaping the edge of your thoughts. That's the strange part about waking up. It doesn't feel like discovery. It feels like remembering. And what you remember terrifies the world. Because once you stop believing in the limits, the world has no more power over you. No system, no rule, no locked door can hold you, unless you believe the lock is real. But this power, this awareness, it's not comfortable. It's not the soft glow of enlightenment. It's not peace, not yet. At first, it's grief. Grief for the time you spent asleep. For the days you begged for meaning from a world that was waiting for you to give it meaning. For the moments you felt powerless, not realizing that every breath was shaping reality. But grief is good. It means the illusion is dying, and what rises in its place is choice. A terrifying, magnificent choice. To take back the lens, to look differently, think differently, feel differently. Because the moment you change the observer, you change the observation. And if that's true, then the next moment of your life is not bound by the last. It is waiting, undefined, a wave, just like it always was. So breathe. Let the old stories drain from your skin. And when you're ready, we'll keep going. Have you ever walked into a room and forgotten why you came? That flicker of confusion, brief, disorienting, where time feels strange and reality goes soft around the edges. That's a glitch, a seam, a reminder that this world, this solid thing you walk through every day, is more like a stage. And sometimes the lights flicker. The deeper you go, the more you start to see them, the seams, little gaps in the illusion, a dream within a dream. But most people never notice. Not because it isn't there, but because their minds were trained not to look. Because from the moment you took your first breath, the script was already waiting. This is who you are. This is how the world works. This is what's real. But none of that was written by you. Your story started with someone else's pen. And so you played the part. You learned your lines, you followed the marks on the stage. Until one day, something broke. A whisper, a shadow, a moment of silence that lasted too long. And suddenly you felt it. The floor isn't real, but what do you do with that? Because once the illusion starts to crack, you can't unsee it. The colors look flatter. The sounds don't echo the same. People speak, but it feels like they're reading from a script. Their eyes dart, but never really see. And worst of all, you feel alone. Like waking up from a dream, but nobody else does. So you start to question. Slowly at first. Quietly. But questions are dangerous things. They dig. They unravel. They burn through the false layers of comfort and leave behind something raw. Something ancient. What is reality? Is it the sound of traffic outside your window? The blue light of your screen? The voice in your head, whispering doubts that don't feel like your own? Or is it something deeper? Something that hums beneath language, beneath memory, beneath matter itself? Because if particles only become real when they're observed, then what were they before? Waves, fields of possibility. And what are you before the world names you? Before you're seen, measured, defined, are you not also a wave? An infinite spectrum of selves collapsing into form each time you say, "This is who I am." But who taught you to say that? Who told you that your body ends at your skin? That your thoughts are locked in your head? That your past is a prison and your future is a thread already woven? Those were not your ideas. They were inherited, imprinted, installed. You were programmed to believe in boundaries. But there are none. Not in the quantum, not in the spiritual, and certainly not in the self. Because boundaries are created by language, and language is a net thrown over the ocean of experience. It catches pieces, but never the whole. You say tree, but the word is not the roots, not the wind in its branches, not the decades spiraled in its heartwood. You say reality, but what you mean is the story you've agreed to see. And stories like can change, but not by force, not by shouting into the void. That's not how reality bends. It bends through awareness, through stillness, through a kind of seeing that has nothing to do with eyes. So stop, listen, feel how quiet the air is now. That's not nothing. That's everything. Because within that silence is a truth too vast for words. You are not inside reality. Reality is inside you. And the only thing keeping it frozen in this form is belief. Not belief in the sense of religion or philosophy, but belief as structure, as scaffolding, as agreement. The internal contract you made, often without knowing it, that said, "I accept this as real." And then the world nodded and said, "So it shall be." You see, the universe is not a machine. It's a mirror. It does not judge, it does not punish, it simply reflects. Show it chaos, and you'll see chaos reflected back. Show it unworthiness, and it will become a hall of rejection. But show it peace, even for a moment, and the reflection begins to shift, slowly, softly, because reality is not loud. It listens. And right now, it's listening to you. So what are you saying? Not with words, with your focus, your attention, your vibration. Because that's the true language of reality. And here's the secret most will never be told. You don't get what you want in life. You get what you are aligned with. If you're aligned with fear, you'll find things to fear. If you're aligned with doubt, doors will stay closed. But if you, even for a moment, align with wonder, with possibility, with the idea that you are the projector, not the screen, then the entire structure begins to warp, not all at once, not with thunder, but with a whisper, a breeze where there was no wind, a stranger saying what you needed to hear, a coincidence too perfect to ignore. And in those moments, the old belief dies, and something new takes root, something fragile at first, like a spark. But sparks become fire, and fire reshapes worlds. So if you're here, still listening in the dark, still following this voice into deeper water, know this. You're not just hearing a story, you're remembering your role in it. And the part of you that knows how to change everything is waking up. We'll go deeper, but not all at once, because the truth, when spoken too loudly, becomes another illusion. So for now, just breathe, watch the seams, and listen. Part 4. Slow, cinematic voiceover with deep emotional weight and poetic cadence. It's strange, isn't it? How silence starts to feel louder the longer you sit with it. At first it's empty, like the hush of a room after someone leaves. But then it begins to hum, like something alive is hiding beneath the stillness. Something old, watching, waiting, not to scare you, but to be seen. That hum? That's you. The part of you that never fit into the mold they gave you. The part that always felt out of place in this world of clocks and currency and concrete logic. The part that knew, even when you were small, that something about all this didn't add up. You were told to ignore it, to be realistic, to stop daydreaming. But what if that daydream was the only real thing? Because what they call reality is a story with strict rules. Gravity, time, death, cause and effect. You're born, you struggle, you die. And if you're lucky, maybe you're remembered for a little while. That's the script, the collective agreement. But agreements can be broken, and somewhere along the line you did. You felt it. A break in the pattern, a ripple in the simulation, a moment that didn't fit. Maybe it was déjà vu. Maybe it was a dream that came true. Maybe it was the way a stranger said your name, and it felt like you'd heard it 1,000 lifetimes ago. And for just a second, the veil thinned. You saw through, not everything, just enough. Enough to question what this place is, enough to wonder what you are. Because you are not your name. You are not your past. You are not the sum of your trauma or the architecture of your failures. You are not even your body. You are the awareness moving behind your eyes, the dreamer of this dream. And the dream, it bends when you do. That's the part no one tells you. They say the world is fixed, that the rules are written in stone, that you can't fly, that you can't heal, that you can't change the path you're on because the path was laid down before you were even born. But all of that is a lie. Comfortable one, maybe, but still a lie. Because the rules only apply if you agree to them. And agreement is just a form of belief. And belief is where reality begins. Not with atoms, not with laws of physics, but with you. You are the first cause, the original observer, the lens through which the infinite collapses into form. And what you believe, deep down beneath the noise, that is what sculpts the world around you. So what do you believe? Not what you say you believe, but what your actions confess, what your fears reveal, what your loneliness whispers when the lights are out. Do you believe the world is safe? Do you believe you are enough? Do you believe you're broken? 'Cause if you believe it, the mirror will show it. Not to punish you, but to reflect you, honestly, brutally, beautifully. And in that reflection lies your greatest power. Because when you change the image you hold inside, the mirror must obey. And that's what they never wanted you to know. The systems, the structures, the authorities and hierarchies, they all depend on your blindness. They need you to think that change only comes from outside. That salvation is something you earn, not something you remember. But the truth? You don't need to find power. You need to unlearn your powerlessness. It was never real. It was a costume, a mask handed to you the moment you arrived, so you'd forget who you were. And for a while, it worked. You forgot. You got tired. You got small. You made yourself quiet so others could be loud. You dimmed your light so others would feel comfortable in the dark. But the mask is slipping now, isn't it? You feel it in your bones. The tension, the ache, the sense that you're meant for something more, but you can't quite see what it is. That's not confusion. That's the beginning of remembering. And what you're remembering is dangerous into the lie. Because when one person wakes up, they shake the dream for everyone. One voice saying, "This isn't real," can echo into the deepest chambers of collective belief. And that's why you feel the resistance, the pushback, the fear, the gaslighting from the world around you. Because when you change, everything you touch must change too. And some things, some people will fight to stay asleep. They need the dream, they need the story, even if it hurts them. But you don't need it anymore. You're starting to see the threads, the way the illusion is stitched together by your perception, your attention, your emotion. And once you see the thread, you can pull it, gently, slowly, and the whole tapestry begins to unravel, not into nothing, but into possibility. And that is the scariest thing of all, that life is not predetermined, that you are not trapped, that you can be at anything. But choice is heavy when you've never had it. It trembles in your hands like fire, because now there's no one left to blame, no one to wait for, no permission slip coming in the mail. It's just you and the mirror and the moment. So breathe. Feel how quiet the world has become around you. That's not absence. That's space waiting for you to shape it. And as long as you remember who you are beneath the noise, you will never be powerless again. Let's keep going. There's more to see. Let's pause. Not stop, just slow down even more. Feel the space between this word and the next. That's where the truth lives. Not in the noise. Not in the arguments. Not in the endless rush to name, label, prove. But in the spaces between things. The silence behind sound. The breath before thought. The stillness no one ever teaches you how to feel. Because the world you were raised in never valued silence. It taught you to fill every gap, to speak, to scroll, to move. To run from stillness like it was dangerous. And maybe it is, because silence has a habit of showing you things. Not with language, but with memory. Not with logic, but with knowing. And when you sit still long enough, the veil thins. And beneath the hum of modern life, you begin to feel it. The great quiet presence you've always known was there. Not a god above. Not a force outside, but a field. A living field of intelligence that surrounds you and responds to you, softly, like a tide, like breath. This field has been called many names. The quantum vacuum, the akasha, source, consciousness. But names don't matter here, only experience does. And the experience, it's simple, but impossible to forget. It feels like home, like remembering something ancient inside you that you never knew you lost. And suddenly, reality isn't out there anymore. It's here, inside, and responsive. You speak not with your voice, but with your attention, and the field listens. You focus, and the field organizes. You believe, and the field responds. You doubt, and the field waits. It doesn't punish. It doesn't push. It simply mirrors. And this is where the deception begins to unravel. Because now you see the trick. The lie wasn't just that you're small. The lie was that you're separate. That there's a hard line between subject and object. Between you and the world. Between mind and matter. But quantum physics shattered that wall a century ago. It told us the observer affects the observed. That matter doesn't even exist as matter until it's seen. That particles are possibilities until we look. And what is looking, really? It's awareness. Attention. Consciousness. Not something your brain produces like heat from a furnace, but something more fundamental, maybe even the fabric of everything. And if that's true, if consciousness is the canvas upon which reality is painted, then what does that make you? Not just a mind inside a body, but the body inside the mind. Not a visitor in a cold mechanical universe, but the one who brings the universe into focus by simply being aware. And this is not philosophy. This is physics. This is the double-slit experiment. This is the observer effect. This is the terrifying, beautiful truth at the heart of the atom. That the world isn't there until it is here, in your awareness. That the tree falling in the forest, it doesn't make a sound until it enters consciousness. So what happens when you stop watching the news? What happens when you unplug from the narrative of fear? What happens when you pull your attention inward and begin to listen, really listen, to the quiet voice beneath all the noise? Reality shifts, not all at once, but subtly, delicately, like mist curling into new shapes. Because you are not a spectator here. You are the projector, and every belief you hold about yourself, about others, about the world, is a lens, a filter. And the image you see, it bends to the lens. So, what lens are you looking through? Is it one of trauma? Of scarcity? Of unworthiness? If so, don't judge it. You didn't choose those lenses. You inherited them, passed down through generations like hand-me-downs from a wounded world. But now you can choose. You can hold up each belief like a stone and ask, is this mine? Is this true? Is this serving the reality I want to experience? And if the answer is no, you can let it go. You don't need to fight it. You don't need to rewrite your whole story overnight. You just need to see it, clearly, lovingly, as the illusion it always was. Because illusions lose their power when you stop feeding them, and when the old lenses fall away, new light comes in. You begin to see the world not as it was, but as it could be. Alive, connected, evolving, and you begin to feel something you haven't felt in a long time. Maybe ever. Not hope, not joy, but sovereignty. The quiet, steady knowing that this is your reality, and you can shape it, not with force, not with noise, but with intention, with presence, with the soft but unstoppable power of remembering who you are. So tonight as you sit in the dark, maybe with a candle, maybe with the fan humming low, just breathe. Feel the hum. The field is listening, and your story is starting to change. What if I told you that the prison you feel yourself trapped in was never built of walls? That the weight pressing down on your chest, the ceilings you keep hitting, the invisible line you feel you're not allowed to cross, none of it is real in the way you've been taught to define real. It's not made of stone, it's made of story. Story so ancient, so deeply rooted, it's become part of your nervous system. A story that says you are small, you are separate, you are here to survive, not to awaken. And it doesn't scream at you, it whispers. In the tone of your teacher, in the silence of your father, in the statistics on the news, in the mirror at 2 a.m., when your thoughts run like shadows across the walls of your mind. That's how the story spreads, not like a fire, but like a fog. And in that fog, you forget. You forget that you were born knowing how to feel without explanation, how to trust your body, how to follow wonder instead of worry. You knew before you had words that reality was alive, that it responded to you, that your imagination was not a place you escaped to, but the place you created from. But then, they trained it out of you. The curriculum was subtle. Be good. Sit still. Don't ask too many questions. And slowly, without knowing it, you traded in your truth for their certainty. You stopped asking what was possible, and started asking what was permitted. And that was the moment the simulation took hold. Because the simulation doesn't begin with technology. It begins with belief, with a deep, quiet agreement to accept the world as it's handed to you. To ignore the glitches, to bury the wonder, to reject the parts of yourself that didn't fit the program. But you can only suppress truth for so long. Eventually, it leaks out. In the form of dreams that won't let go. In a sadness you can't explain. In flashes of memory that feel like they're not yours, and yet somehow are. Because somewhere inside you, the original signal is still playing. It's quiet, subtle, but constant. A soft pulse beneath the static, a vibration that says this isn't it. There's more, not out there, in here. And that signal, it's older than the earth, older than time. It's the hum of consciousness itself, the unbroken field beneath the illusion of form. And the moment you turn toward it, even slightly, the illusion begins to shift. You notice how much of your pain isn't coming from the moment, but from the meaning you've attached to it. You notice how every person you've ever met was showing you a part of yourself. You notice that when you let go of fear, not fight it, just stop feeding it, the world softens. And in that softness, something begins to return. Agency, grace, the power to choose again, And that's when the deception trembles, because the greatest trick ever played was convincing you that the system was external, that the enemy was out there, in the government, the economy, the heavens. But the real battle, it was always internal. The battlefield is your attention. The weapon is your belief. And the cost of losing is forgetting who you are. But here's the secret they could never fully erase. You are not the victim of this story. You are the author. And authors can rewrite. They can take the same ink, the same pain, the same past, and reweave it into something new, something sovereign, something sacred. And yes, it's terrifying to wake up, to look around and realize the ground beneath your feet isn't solid, but imagined. That time is fluid, that matter is thought, that everything you've been taught to trust as objective is a mirror for your own state of being. But in that terror, there's liberation, because if you created the cage, you can dissolve it, not with force, not with effort, but with presence. By turning inward, by listening to the signal, by remembering that you are not a character in a cold, predetermined play. You are the dreamer, and every time you shift your perception, the dream shifts with you. So tonight, as the world slows, as the silence deepens, let yourself feel the ground beneath your body. Let yourself listen, not with your ears, but with your whole being. Not for answers, but for that subtle truth beneath all truths. You were never asleep. You were simply dreaming someone else's dream. And now, you're waking up, somewhere in the quiet before dawn. There's a moment when the shadows change. They don't vanish. They don't scream. They simply shift. And you can feel it, that uneasy tremor behind your ribs. A signal that something is no longer hiding. And something else no longer asleep. This moment, it doesn't come with warning. It slips through like a whisper, like mist curling under a locked door. And in that mist, a question rises. What if none of this was ever real? Not just the headlines, not just the labels, the roles, the systems, but the very foundation beneath it all. The floor you've always trusted to hold your weight. What if it was built on nothing but belief? This isn't a riddle. It's a reckoning, because the more you begin to see the patterns, the more they unravel. And the more they unravel, the more the world you thought was fixed becomes strange. Have you noticed how the fabric of reality seems to glitch? How time stutters, memories that feel off, misplaced, rearranged. How people shift before your eyes. One moment familiar, the next like strangers wearing the skin of someone you once knew. How déjà vu isn't just a trick of the brain, but a fracture in the frame itself. You begin to see how everything that once felt solid is rippling, as if the simulation is tired of pretending, because that's what this is, isn't it? Not a world, not a planet, a program, a beautifully rendered experience, but an experience nonetheless. One designed not to imprison you, but to teach you, until you forgot it was a lesson, until you began to believe it was a sentence. But the signs were always there. The ancient texts whispered it. The mystics dreamed it. Even science in its most honest moments confessed it. That reality is not a fixed structure. It's responsive. It's adaptive. It's alive. And it bends to the rhythm of your perception. You were never walking through a world. You were weaving it with every thought, every feeling, every lens through which you chose to see. And the world responded. Not as a judge, not as a god, but as a mirror. So when you see fear, look at your filter. When you feel lack, look at your lens. Because the reflection isn't lying to you. It's just obeying the blueprint you've been taught to forget you're drawing. But you weren't meant to be blind forever. You were meant to wake up, to pause, to breathe, to see the flicker in the matrix for what it is. A mercy, a tiny fracture in the lie, a doorway. And once you step through it even a little, the world starts speaking differently, not in words, but in synchronicity. A book falls off the shelf. A stranger says something that feels like it was meant just for you. A number repeats. A name echoes. A dream returns after years of silence. It doesn't make sense, not to the logical mind, but you feel it, in your bones, in your breath, like the universe is nudging you, not toward a destination, but a remembrance, a return, to the version of yourself that never forgot, the you that understands, not as theory, but as lived truth. That space is not distance, that time is not linear, that you do not move through reality. Reality moves through you, and in that remembering something ancient unlocks, The need to control softens. The need to prove dissolves. The constant seeking quiets. Because you're no longer searching for the truth. You are the truth. And the world around you, it begins to shift in response to that realization. Doors open, walls fade. The people around you seem lighter, or they fall away, not as punishment, but as alignment. Because the simulation can no longer reflect the old story. It must reflect the real you now. And that's when it gets quiet, not empty, but still. And in that stillness, a voice. Not loud, not even spoken. Just a knowing, from somewhere deeper than thought. You were never meant to obey the world. You were meant to awaken it, not through force, but through awareness, through presence, through the quiet, unshakable act of remembering what was always true. That reality is waiting for you to see it, not as it is, but as you are. And now, it's beginning to reflect something new. The strange thing is, once you start to wake up, you don't see more. You start to see less, not in clarity but in complexity. All the noise that once filled your head like static begins to fall away. The urgency, the guilt, the names, the masks, the deadlines etched into the bones of your days. They start to dissolve. You begin to wonder, who was I performing for? Who was I waiting for permission from? Who told me the rules? And why did I follow them so blindly? Because now, when you open your eyes in the morning, the world doesn't feel like it's waiting outside the window. It feels like it's inside you, like it's rising with you. Not separate, not foreign, but intimate, like breath. And that's when the illusions start to shatter, not with explosions, but with soft, undeniable clarity. The jobs you thought gave you identity, the relationships you thought defined your worth, the routines you followed like a script, thinking they would lead you to safety, to meaning, to some promised state of arrival. You see them now, not as traps, but as dreams, old ones, dreams that served their time, then faded. And in their place, an emptiness opens, not a hollow one, but a clean space, like fresh snow untouched by footsteps. And in that silence, the real questions rise. Not what should I do, but who is doing the choosing. Not how do I make the right move, but who told me there were moves at all. Not where am I going, but who says I'm not already there. These are not the questions the simulation wants you to ask, because these questions unravel its scaffolding. They short-circuit the game. You were never meant to slow down like this, to stare at a tree for too long, to lose time watching clouds move like breath across a sky no one owns, to feel the ache in your chest and not push it away. You were meant to keep moving, keep scrolling, keep striving, keep fearing. But now you're still, and the moment you become still, everything begins to answer you, not in words, in presence. The wind shifts as you walk by. A bird turns its head and stares too long. A stranger laughs at something you didn't hear, but somehow you felt. And you begin to notice that this world is not passive. It is not dead matter. It is not a backdrop. It is alive, and it is listening. Always has been, because reality is not a place. It is a dialogue, an unfolding conversation between your awareness and the field around you. And the more honestly you speak to it, through feeling, through intention, through stillness, the more clearly it speaks back. This is where things begin to turn. Because once you realize that the game was never external, you stop trying to win it. You stop needing the trophy, the approval, the finish line, and you begin to rewrite the code, not by hacking it, not by mastering techniques, but by changing the signal you broadcast. That's all it ever was. Not effort, not struggle, frequency. You shift your frequency, and the world reorganizes around it. What you once had to chase now begins to find you. What you once feared now dissolves before it can touch you. What you once called coincidence now happens daily. Not because you've become special, but because you've become aligned. Aligned with the one truth the simulation can never overwrite. That consciousness creates reality, not the other way around. And in that knowing, something ancient wakes up in your spine. A memory of a time before time, when you weren't separate from the stars, when you didn't have a name, when you didn't need one, because you were the pattern, you were the field, the code, the voice behind the voice, the infinite peering through finite eyes. And maybe, just maybe, You still are. You never stopped being it. You only forgot. But now, in the quiet of this moment, as the simulation hums softly around you like a dream about to dissolve, you remember, not with the mind, not even with words, but with something deeper, something that existed before you learned to speak. A feeling, a stillness, a knowing that cannot be taken. And once you feel that, the illusion begins to lose its grip, not all at once, but piece by piece. And with every layer that falls away, you get lighter, not in body, in being. Because you're no longer carrying what isn't yours. You're no longer feeding a reality that doesn't serve your truth. You're no longer playing a game you didn't agree to. You're waking up, and the simulation can feel it. It's adapting, watching, but for the first time, so are you. You might have noticed, the more you wake up, the more alone you feel. Not lonely and not exactly. It's different. It's quieter, like the silence after a storm, or the hush of snowfall over a battlefield. You're surrounded by people, by laughter, by headlines, by noise. But something inside you no longer connects in the same way, like a frequency you've outgrown. Because once you stop believing the simulation is real, you stop needing to belong to it. And in that moment, something breaks, softly, painfully, beautifully. The illusion of fitting in. It was never about you. It was about the role you agreed to play. The mask you wore so well, you forgot it was a mask. And now, you've taken it off, and the world looks back at you. Confused, nervous, angry even. Because when you stop pretending, you force others to see how deeply they still are. It's not your fault, but it is your path. The old story doesn't fit anymore. The one where you followed the rules, stayed small, smiled on cue. The one where you feared the unknown, trusted the calendar, and swallowed the ache in your chest because everyone else seems fine. But you're not everyone else. You never were. You were a seed buried under centuries of noise. And now you've cracked open, and you can't uncrack, can't go back, because the moment you saw the script, you stopped reciting it, and now you speak from somewhere deeper. It doesn't always come out clean. Sometimes it's just a stare, or a silence, or a sentence you never would have dared to say before. But it's real. It's yours. And that's more than the world has ever asked you to be. You start noticing other cracks too, in people, in systems, in history. How everything that was built to look permanent is crumbling, not collapsing with noise, but disintegrating in plain sight. Like how the clock no longer rules your time. Like how the news no longer steers your thoughts. Like how you've stopped believing that suffering is noble, or that happiness must be earned. You start unlearning, not just facts, but meanings, money, time, work, love, all of it. You begin to feel how these words are cages, how they were programmed to keep you inside a particular frequency, a narrow field where you'd never ask real questions. But now the questions rise anyway, like water under locked doors. What if time isn't linear? What if work isn't sacrifice? What if love isn't pain? What if life isn't supposed to be hard? What if that was the greatest illusion of all? That joy had to be earned. That rest had to be deserved. That freedom had to be granted. No, the deeper truth is quieter and older. It lives in the cells of your body, in the spaces between thoughts. It hums through your dreams, through the moments when everything slows down, and nothing matters except what's true. And what's true is this: you were not born broken. You were not born guilty. You were not born to prove your worth. You were born whole, born connected, born knowing. But they built a world to make you forget. A world of ringing bells and deadlines, of tests and taxes, of shame wrapped in achievement. A world that said, you are what you produce. You are what you own. You are what others say you are. But you are not what you were told. You are the one who watches. You are the stillness between choices. You are the awareness behind the eyes. And the system, it can't reach you there. No algorithm, no government, no doctrine or dogma can find you in that silence. Because that's where your sovereignty lives. That's where you remember you are not a product, or a profile, or a puzzle to be solved. You are a portal, a threshold, a point of consciousness through which the universe becomes aware of itself. Not in some poetic metaphor. In actual, physical truth. Because without your observation, This world does not take form without your awareness. There is no collapse of probability into presence. Without you, there is no here. So breathe. Let that truth settle, not like a fact, but like a remembering. And as it lands, notice what changes. Notice how the fear doesn't grip quite as tight. Notice how the weight begins to lift, not all at once, but steadily, like morning light melting frost. And suddenly, you're not escaping the illusion. You're dissolving it. From the inside out, sometimes silence is the loudest sound. Not the silence of absence, but the silence of recognition. The kind that arrives when words fall apart and meaning reveals itself beneath the noise. That's where you are now. A place beyond instruction, beyond imitation, where knowledge isn't memorized as it's remembered. And what you're remembering is older than any language. You were never meant to be ordinary. You were never meant to live on autopilot, navigating a world carved by other people's fears. You were meant to see, but sight, real sight, comes with a price. Because when you begin to see through it, everything changes. You begin to notice how much of your identity was built for you, not by you. Your name, your gender, your value, your history, all spoken over you before you had a voice of your own. And you wore it all so well. You had to, because to question it would have meant isolation, exile, rejection from the tribe. And the child in you couldn't afford that. So you folded yourself in, shaped your soul to match their expectations, smiled when it hurt, laughed when it stung, numbed yourself just enough to survive the performance. But something inside never stopped whispering. A truth too sacred to die. A flicker in your chest. A quiet no. In the face of every lie dressed as love. And now, you've stopped ignoring it. Now the whisper has become a voice. Not loud, but unshakable. And it says, you are not who they told you to be. You never were. They told you life was a race. But you were born to walk slowly and notice. They told you love was possession. But you were born to feel it flow freely through everything. They told you success was power. But you were born to melt into stillness and remember your place in the infinite. And now that you've remembered, you cannot unsee it. You start to feel it in your body. How it tenses in lies. How it softens in truth. You notice how your heartbeat shifts when you speak your soul aloud. You feel how your breath deepens when you stop pretending to be small. And those moments, they're not accidents. They're proof. Proof that your inner world is no longer following their map. You're drawing your own, step by step, word by word, breath by breath. You are no longer trying to escape the system. You are dissolving your belief in it. Because the real matrix is not built of machines or screens. It's built of agreements, silent ones, the kind you didn't know you made. I agree to be less than I am. I agree to chase what I'll never catch. I agree to be at war with myself to make others comfortable. But you don't agree anymore, and without your agreement, it all begins to fall apart. You look around and realize the world isn't dying. It's shedding. Everything fake is falling away. The politics, the institutions, the illusions of control, the endless striving toward enough. It's all unraveling, not as a punishment, but as a clearing, a great remembering. And as it falls, you rise, not in power, but in presence, not as someone who conquers, but as someone who witnesses, because that's what the awakened do. They don't react. They remember. They remember how to stand still while the world turns upside down. They remember that truth needs no defense, that love needs no permission, that existence is not a test, it's a gift. And suddenly, your very presence becomes a beacon, not a spotlight, a candle, soft, steady, unbothered by the storm. You walk slower now, not because you're lost, but because you no longer rush to be elsewhere. You've stopped searching for the door, because you are the door, the portal through which the illusion ends, and the real begins. And so the game ends, not with a victory, but with a surrender. You no longer need to prove, or chase, or convince. You just need to be. And somehow, that's everything. Because when you exist in truth, you shift the world without even trying. And all the old gods, fear, shame, scarcity, they fall quiet in your presence. Not because you fought them, but because you no longer believed in them. And in their silence, you remember what you are. Not a role, not a label, not even a name. You are the awareness that sees through every mask. The light that makes the dream visible. You are not the illusion. You are the one who woke up inside it. There's a moment, quiet and almost imperceptible, when the house of mirrors cracks, not with a crash, but with a sigh, a soft, unceremonious breath, like the soul finally exhaling after lifetimes of holding it in. That's where you are now, not at the end of something, not at the beginning, but in the strange middle space where identities dissolve and silence starts to speak louder than thought. You're not who you were, and you're not yet who you will be. You are unbecoming, and that's the most sacred part, because before something is born, something must die. Not in grief, but in grace. You begin to notice how everything you thought was you was just an echo, a survival pattern, a reflex, a borrowed narrative passed down like a family heirloom, carried not because it fit, but because no one dared set it down. But now your hands are empty, and you are not afraid of their emptiness. You start to feel how much of your suffering was never yours to begin with. How many beliefs you held because someone else was too afraid to let them go. You carried their fear like armor. You wore their shame like skin. You shaped your worth to fit inside someone else's idea of what a life should be. And for a long time, that's what love meant. To shrink yourself for others. To disappear just enough to be accepted. But no more. You are no longer willing to trade your truth for belonging. No longer willing to wear a mask just to be seen. No longer willing to silence your knowing. To keep someone else comfortable in their forgetting. And that's what liberation feels like. Not a roar, but a release. Like laying down a weight you didn't know you were carrying. Like looking in the mirror and seeing someone you've never truly met, but somehow always known. A face unburdened by performance, eyes soft with clarity, a presence untouched by expectation. And for the first time, you don't rush to define it. You don't panic to label it. You just let it be. Because you've realized something powerful. Who you are is not something that can be named. It is not your history, not your trauma, not your roles or relationships. It is the awareness behind all of it, the stillness watching the storm. And in that stillness, you begin to listen, not to the voice in your head, but to the silence underneath it. The space where intuition lives, the place where truth doesn't shout, it hums. That hum is soft, ancient, pure. It doesn't sell anything. It doesn't beg to be heard. It doesn't play the game. It simply is. And when you begin to hear it, really hear it, everything that isn't real begins to fade. You lose your taste for chaos, for noise, for shallow things pretending to be deep. You become disinterested in arguments, because you realize truth doesn't need to compete. You become bored with the illusion of success, because it was never yours to begin with. You stop chasing, not because you've given up, but because you've arrived. And what you find when you arrive is not some grand revelation, not some mountain peak of certainty. What you find is yourself, not the version you curated, not the persona you performed, but the raw, electric, unfiltered essence of your being. And it is stunning, not in a way that dazzles, in a way that resonates. It doesn't demand attention, it commands presence. You begin to live from this place, softly, subtly, sacredly. And the world shifts around you, not because you tried to change it, but because you stopped agreeing with the lie. You stopped pretending, and in that refusal, you became something impossible to control, something they can't predict, can't monetize, can't silence. A human being who remembers they are not a product, not a machine, not a cog, a consciousness, a pulse, a spark of the infinite in temporary form. And suddenly, you don't need to know what's next. You don't need a map, because you've become the compass. You trust your own north now. Not because it's logical, but because it feels like home. You stop looking outside yourself for validation. You stop chasing symbols of success. You find peace in paradox, joy in stillness, meaning in the mundane. You feel the sacred in a quiet room, in the breath before a word, in the space between your thoughts. And in that space, you realize you were never lost. You were just buried under stories, under expectations, under centuries of forgetting. But now, you're remembering. And what you're remembering isn't new. It's eternal. It was always here. It is you. It begins like this, not with thunder, but with a whisper, a subtle flicker at the edge of your perception, the sense that something is watching, not from outside, but from within. Have you felt it? That strange familiarity, when you look into the eyes of a stranger and something ancient looks back, that chill behind your spine. When a moment feels too perfect, like déjà vu, but deeper, like your soul has been here before. It's not your imagination, it's your memory, trying to breathe through the noise. Because somewhere beneath the layers, beneath the skin and the story and the scaffolding of identity, you are waking up, not just to who you are, but to what this is. This world, this dream, this stage wrapped in 1,000 illusions. And with every breath, the veil grows thinner. You start to notice the glitches, not on screens, in people, in conversations, in time itself. How it bends, speeds up, slows down, falls away entirely. You speak a thought, and the world answers. You imagine a face, and they appear. You feel something long before it happens. Coincidence? That's what they told you. That's what they told all of us. Because if they could convince you, it was random. They could keep you asleep, but you're not sleeping anymore. And when the dreamer wakes, the dream begins to shake. You begin to realize the boundaries aren't real. That time isn't linear. That space isn't empty. That your mind isn't in your body. Your body is in your mind. You're not inside the world. The world is inside you. Youto, the observer, the projector of the movie, the light behind the film, the silent awareness that gives rise to form and calls it reality. And if that's true, if this whole thing is responsive, reflective, if the universe is a mirror held up to your consciousness, then what have you been creating? What have you believed? Without question, that you are small, separate, unworthy, alone. And where did that belief come from? Who planted it? Who benefits from your forgetting? Because forgetfulness isn't accidental. It's been engineered, generations deep, coded into culture, marketed as normal. A society that teaches obedience over inquiry, conformity over intuition, spectacle over silence. And so you were fed a fantasy. From birth, they named it reality, and you never thought to question it. Until now. Until the cracks began to show. Until the system started glitching. So loudly, you could no longer pretend. So you stopped. You paused. And in the space between breaths, you asked the most dangerous question. What if none of this is real? And in that moment, the walls trembled. The rules twisted. And the veil, the thin, shimmering fabric that held this theater together, began to fall. But don't be afraid. You're not losing your world. You're remembering that it was never fixed to begin with. And once you remember that, you gain something extraordinary. Agency. The power not just to navigate the world, but to rewrite it, not with effort, but with awareness. Not by force, but by focus. The world responds not to what you want, but to who you are being. And if you are being unconscious, chaotic, afraid, then the mirror reflects chaos and fear. But when you become presence, calm, rooted, awake, the universe shifts in response. It has to. It always has. You just didn't see it before. You thought the world was happening to you. You didn't know it was happening through you, but now you do. So what will you create now? Now that you know? Now that the veil is no longer holding you? Will you cling to the dream? Or will you become the dreamer? Will you repeat the story? Or write a new one? This is the power they never wanted you to find. Because a person who remembers their power cannot be bought, cannot be tamed, cannot be controlled. They love a world where you doubt yourself, where you outsource your truth, where you beg for permission to be whole. But those days are ending. You can feel it. The air is different. The frequency is rising. What you were yesterday is falling away, and what you are becoming is too vast for words. So let go. Let the old illusions rot. Let the roles burn. Let the lies collapse under their own weight. This isn't death. It's remembering. It's waking up in the dream and realizing you can fly. Part 14, The Quiet Revolution of Remembering. It's almost silent now, like the world is holding its breath, as if everything, the noise, the distractions, the false lights, has dimmed just long enough for you to hear it. The signal beneath the static, the voice beneath the voice, the memory that's not made of time. Do you feel it? It doesn't shout. It doesn't demand. It waits. It waits for you to stop looking out there and look in here, because the greatest revolution was never about fire and blood. It was never fought with flags or swords. It was never about overthrowing kings or systems. The real revolution is remembering who you are before the world told you who to be. And it starts in silence, in stillness, in the refusal to perform for a machine that feeds on your amnesia. They trained you well, didn't they? To wake up and plug in, to scroll, to compare, to ache for validation, as if your soul depended on it, to perform happiness, to monetize your passion, to be productive, even while dreaming. You were taught to be useful, to be profitable, to be palatable, but never to be you, never to be whole, never to be free in ways that can't be sold back to you. Because if you woke up, really woke up, what would you stop buying? Who would you stop obeying? A free human is the most dangerous thing on earth, not because they destroy the system, but because they no longer need it. And here's the truth most never hear. You don't need permission to be real. You don't need approval to slow down, to feel, to speak from the gut instead of the script. You don't need to explain your awakening. It doesn't need to make sense to anyone else, because this path, this quiet return to yourself, was never meant to be understood by the sleeping. You are not here to be understood. You are here to remember, to reclaim what was buried, to look in the mirror and not just see a face, but a force, a flicker of eternity, wearing human form. You are not your name, not your past, not the list of mistakes, or achievements, or things they told you were true. You are the sky behind the weather. You are the space in which it all unfolds. And once you remember this, deeply, cellularly, everything changes. Because now when fear arrives, you don't run, you don't fight. You watch, you meet it with presence, and it dissolves. Because fear is a fog. It cannot survive the sun of awareness. You no longer react from programming. You respond from consciousness. You no longer follow the script. You write the language, and it ripples, not just in your life, but in the field. Because when one person wakes up, others feel it. It creates an opening, a frequency, a way out. And suddenly, without trying, you become a lighthouse, not by shining for attention, but by simply being what you always were, unafraid, unshakable, unbound. This is the revolution they can't censor, the uprising that requires no violence, the quiet roar of millions remembering they were never broken, only convinced they were. And maybe that's the point of it all, not to escape this world, but to bring light into it, not to destroy the dream, but to wake up inside it, to live, not as a prisoner of perception, but as a lucid creator, in a realm of infinite mirrors. And when you do, when you hold that frequency, not just once, but daily, moment to moment, reality begins to respond. Things bend, paths open, time rearranges itself to match your remembering. Synchronicities bloom like wildflowers. Not magic, not coincidence, just the mechanics of a conscious universe. Finally meeting you at the level of your truth. And that's where you are now. Not at the edge of something, but in the middle of its unfolding. You're not done. You're just beginning to speak in the language of light. So breathe, stay soft, stay open, stay awake. The next step is already waiting for you to see it. And now we're here, at the place where the illusion thins, so deeply, so delicately, that even the idea of an ending feels like just another story. Because this is not an ending. This is the moment the hologram flickers, the projector slows, and the lights, the artificial ones, start to dim. What's left is not silence, it's truth, a deeper tone beneath the chaos. Ahum! Ancient, soft, alive. that's been with you since before you had a name. It isn't trying to convince you. It doesn't shout or demand belief. It simply waits. And when you're quiet enough, when you've pulled your senses back from the spinning machine, you feel it, not as thought, but as presence. You remember what they tried to make you forget. That you are the dreamer, that you are the observer, that you are not the reflection in the mirror, but the light behind it. And the world, the so-called real world, it was never outside of you. It was your own frequency, your own script, wrapped in form and function, waiting for you to see through it. You were never trapped. You were never small. You were never powerless. You were simply taught to look away from the source and stare instead at the shadows on the wall. But now you've turned. Now you've faced the fire. And in doing so, you've begun to reshape the dream itself. Because that's the paradox, isn't it? The world only becomes solid when you stop questioning it. But when you turn inward, when you peel back the layers, when you dare to say, maybe nothing is what I thought it was, that's when the illusion begins to collapse. Not violently, not all at once, but like mist retreating before the dawn, like a forgotten melody slowly returning. Piece by piece, the old scaffolding falls away, and what's left? Not nothing, not emptiness, but spaciousness, possibility, a reality that bends to presence, a dream that answers to the dreamer. So now the question isn't whether this world is real. The question is, who are you now that you know the truth? Who are you now that you can feel just how fluid this all is? Now that you can shape it with your attention, your intention, your vibration. You don't need to escape this reality. You were never trapped. You just need to remember, to stop participating in your own forgetting, to reclaim the smallest, most sacred thing, your perception, because the moment you choose presence, even for a second, you realign the field. You shift the projection. You become the author again. And if enough people do that, if enough of us step back into awareness, quietly, softly, without fear or force, the entire system of illusion collapses under its own weight, not with a bang, but with a breath. Not in fire, but in light. So take a moment, turn off the noise, close your eyes. Feel the pulse beneath your ribs. That's not just a heartbeat. That's the rhythm of remembering. The dream is not over. It's just begun to shimmer. Now it's yours to shape. So, be still, be gentle, be awake. Because the world you believed was outside of you was always waiting. Inside. If you're still here, still breathing slow, still wrapped in the hush of this unraveling story. Thank you. You were meant to hear this, not by chance, not by accident, but by resonance. If something inside you stirred, even faintly, don't rush to explain it. Don't scroll past it. Sit with it. Let it stretch. Let it echo. And when you're ready, let me know where you're listening from. Whisper something in the comments, even just a still awake. It helps more than you think. Not for me, but for the next soul wandering through the noise, looking for a sign they're not dreaming alone. If you want more stories like this, more forgotten truths, more soft rebellions against the false real, subscribe. Not just with a click, but with your attention. Your awareness is the currency here. Spend it wisely. And if this episode left an imprint, if your perception feels different, if your breath feels deeper, share it. Not to spread content, to ripple consciousness. The algorithm doesn't need your help, but someone out there, someone just like you, might. So for now, turn off the lights. Let the silence fill the room. Let the illusion fade. You're not watching a story. You're waking from one. And the next dream, the one you shape with intention, is just beginning. Sleep gently. Or stay awake. We'll meet again. In the place where reality bends. In the stillness. Between the seen and the felt. This is Veil of Truth. And you were never meant to forget. Not really. Not forever.